On this episode of Retro Game Living Room, we're going to take a trip back to the past all the way to the year 1972. We're going to be taking a closer look at the very first video game console ever released. This is Ralph Baer's Magnavox Odyssey, so stick around. We're going to start with a look at the shipping box. This was actually how this was mailed out to customers, and when I bought this on eBay, as you can see, this is how it was mailed out to me, much to my chagrin. I'm not sure what this envelope here was used for, but the box is in really good shape, and we can see the original shipping still printed on it. And now to take a look at the box inside the box. The top is removed to reveal the styrofoam encasing that protects the Magnavox Odyssey. We can see that there's a lot of stuff here in the box, so we're going to start taking a look at it. Let's begin with the game cards. These are just PCBs with jumpers on them. There's nothing in them. Very simple. Plugs into the console, and then it tells it what to do. We have some poker chips which various Odyssey games use. Several games on Odyssey require the use of game cards, and here are two examples. Next thing I want to do is give you a quick look at the manual for the Magnavox Odyssey. The manual contains instructions for all of the games that came with the Odyssey unit, how to play them. It also contains the basic setup and installation instructions. One thing I have in my Odyssey that I'm not sure if Odyssey actually came with at some point or if it's just something that got thrown in here is this Magnavox television catalog from 1973. Which mostly shows different Magnavox TV consoles, but it also has an advertisement for the Magnavox Odyssey. Magnavox Odyssey games use many board game elements designed by Bradford Coote Design, who were contracted by Gray Advertising, Magnavox's advertising agency, out of Chicago. There was no video game design industry to speak of at this point, so graphic designers and ad agencies were a logical choice. The Odyssey also comes with a pair of dice because it welcomes you to paradise. Removing the top styrofoam layer reveals the console and its two controllers, as well as a switch box and more board game style elements such as play money. This is for the roulette game. The packaging is extremely well engineered, and even though it's the first video game console, it remains some of the best engineered console game packaging in the history of gaming. Everything is designed perfectly to support the system, its controllers, and accessories. Though it was released in 1972, the Magnavox Odyssey is really the result of mid-1960s design. Several cost-cutting measures were made, including the elimination of color, which some of the Odyssey prototypes actually had. The Odyssey therefore had several built-in screen overlays. These are not just to add background graphics, but also to add gameplay elements. Ralph Baer had originally envisioned the Odyssey to be part of a cable service. Ralph Baer approached the company Teleprompter, which was one of the largest cable TV providers in the United States at the time. The idea was that the cable company would actually broadcast, quote, live backgrounds. These live backgrounds could be animated, and then these simple graphics would be overlain on top of them. It was a really ingenious, forward-thinking idea, especially for the 1960s. The Odyssey hand controller is a practical design featuring 3 knobs, one for vertical control, one for horizontal control, and one to control the direction of the ball, which is called the English controller. Each controller also contains one button called Reset. It's time to take a closer look at the Odyssey console itself, which features its name and a trim of wood grain surrounded by black accents, a matted textured top cover, and beautiful smooth white shiny finish. It has a single cartridge slot, which is where the PCB game cards go into it. Taking a look at the back of the console, we can see one power port. There are control knobs to set the position of the vertical line, as well as the ball speed, and your controller ports, video ports, and accessory ports are all here. Taking a look beneath the console, we can see the serial number, the patent numbers, and then we can see that this is a Run 2 console. So this one was made in 1973. We also have the battery compartment. Opening the battery door, we find instructions on how to change the system from channel 3 to channel 4. As a PSA, please do not store your batteries in your system. This one has batteries in it because I was just using it before filming this. I showed you that the Odyssey has a power supply port. However, the system did not come with a power supply. This is the optional, sold separately, Magnavox AC adapter for your Magnavox Odyssey video game console. It's time to go ahead and play the Odyssey. This is the first game, table tennis, which is the most famous Odyssey game as it's very similar to the more famous Pong. You bounce a ball back and forth between the paddles, and you can see the curvature that I'm putting on the ball here by using the English knob on the controller. This would be the game that Nolan Bushnell would play at a demonstration in Los Angeles in 1972 that would inspire him to create Pong. The Magnavox Odyssey produces no sound. However, Ralph Baer did eventually design an active card which had speakers on it. However, Magnavox was not interested in selling those. Here you can see a combination of how the hand controller works in conjunction with the gameplay. You see the reset button serves the ball, and the English knob, as previously mentioned, puts a little spin on that ball to give it a tricky curve. Before we move on from table tennis, there's something I really want to show you. Here is my naked Magnavox Odyssey console. There are several pots on the console itself that can be adjusted to modify the screen elements. They can change the width and the height of the paddles, the width and the height of the ball, and the width of the vertical line. I'm going to adjust the height of the paddles and then play tennis in a more, or table tennis in a more traditional way. Now Odyssey table tennis resembles a much more modern looking version of Pong, playing with elongated paddles as opposed to smaller squares. The next Odyssey game I want to show you is tennis. The previous game was table tennis, which is played with game card number 1. Tennis is played with game card number 3, which is also the same game card used for hockey. The difference here is it uses the screen overlays for the background, and it doesn't draw the vertical line. The instructions also instruct you to use more tennis-style rules for play. The next game I'm going to show you is Submarine, where one player is the captain of a convoy ship trying to follow the sea lanes, and another player is a submarine shooting at the ships. The submarine captain uses both his reset button and the reset button of the ship captain to fire torpedoes from either the left or right of the screen. This is, in effect, the world's very first shooter video game. This is Cat and Mouse, which utilizes game card number 4. The objective is for the mouse to get to the bottom right-hand corner of the screen while avoiding the blue squares without getting caught by the cat. If the mouse is intercepted by the cat, then the mouse's player square will disappear from the field of play. One thing I love about the Magnavox Odyssey is it's really fun to be creative and make up your own games for it. It's easy to do. Here, using game card 4, we've turned it into a game of tag. Player 1 chases around player 2 and tries to catch player 2 as many times as possible before the sand in the timer at the bottom left of the screen runs out. Here's another simple homebrew for the Magnavox Odyssey using the tag card. I've used sticky notes as screen overlays. One player starts in the upper left and the other starts in the upper right. There's a safe zone, and the goal for the player in the left is to get to the base without being caught. Thus far, I've been focusing on video game-like games for the Odyssey. Now here's one that is quite the opposite. This is Simon Says. Simon Says, touch your knee. And that's all there is to that one. Not only did the Odyssey come with games in the box, Magnavox also released several sold separately games like for a traditional video game system. In 1972, they released a set of 6 games, which I have here. So we have a volleyball game, and we're going to be taking a look at gameplay on this one in this video. Wipeout is sort of a board game style game. Invasion is a super in-depth board game style game. I'll show you the pieces, but we're not going to be playing this in this video. It'll get its own review in a future video. Fun Zoo, I don't even know where to start with this one. A baseball hybrid video game board game, much like the football game that the system comes with. And Handball, which we'll be taking a look at also today. So these are the 6 games that came out in 1972. But these aren't the only extra games that were sold for the Magnavox Odyssey. In 1973, Magnavox released 4 extra video games. I have 2 of them right here. One of those games is Brainwave, and as you can see for the 1973 releases, Magnavox totally changed the box art style. The other one is Interplanetary Voyage, which comes with game card 12 and some of the prettiest screen overlay art, probably the prettiest screen overlay art of any game on Magnavox Odyssey. This game will also get its own video. I promised you a look at Invasion, which is the original Odyssey's Risk-style game. Of course, the Odyssey 2 more famously had board game-style video games. Invasion has treasure cards, and it has a game board, and of course 2 screen overlays like all games do. Let's go ahead and take a look at the screen overlay graphics. These are for just the very intermittent video game portions of the game. Almost the entire game is a board game played on this game board where your goal is to capture various castles. This game does not come with its own game card. It uses an existing game card, but it comes with game pieces, and my goodness, there are a lot of them. Let's previously mentioned, this will be its own video. So if you're curious about this, subscribe, stick around. I'm going to cover this one in some depth. This is the Handball extra game from 1972, an electronic version of Handball that challenges your responses and reactions in a fast-moving game. It comes packed with 2 screen overlays of 2 different sizes. All Odyssey games have 2 different size screen overlays. We can see that, it just looks like a handball court. And it's got 2 guys on there, presumably your guys playing handball. It comes packed with game card number 8. Not all extra games include game cards. This one happens to include game card 8. And of course we have some instructions in case you didn't know how to play handball. Now you do. And now we're ready to play. In the first generation era of video gaming history, handball would eventually become a staple of Pong-style consoles for its simple and easy gameplay mechanics. Here I'm playing handball, and you can see that, it's basically what you would expect. The ball bounces off the wall. Like Odyssey games, it does have an English function on it, which is what helps you to hit it to the right direction and trip up your opponent. Sometimes it even makes it so you accidentally hit the ball back to yourself, as you can see me doing a couple times here. Volleyball is another one of the 1972 extra games. This one uses game card number 7, and it's the only game to do so. The game is extremely difficult. It relies heavily on the English to serve the ball over the net and then to return the ball back over the net. The problem with this is that the English knob doesn't recenter itself, which is something that Ralph Baer discussed in his book, Video Games in the Beginning. And there was a modification made to the Magnavox Odyssey controller to do this, but it was never brought to market. That resulted in this game being almost just impossibly difficult to even get a few volleys in a row. What you've seen me do is, after an hour of practice, the best that me and my partner were able to accomplish in this game. So I'm just going to move on to something else. No review of the Magnavox Odyssey could possibly be complete without taking a look at the rifle and the light gun games. This is a shooting gallery which actually contains a few different games in it. My box isn't in great shape, but the gun is, and got it for a pretty good discount, which is always nice, fellow collectors. Inside the box we can see that the gun is firmly held in place with styrofoam. It has styrofoam rest, and it has plastic to cover and protect the butt and the barrel of the gun. It comes with 2 game cards. The game cards it comes with are numbers 9 and 10. You'll notice that these PCBs are white, but I've also seen pictures of them in brown. It also comes with screen overlays and instructions, which I happen to store not in this box, but in the Magnavox Odyssey box. So let's play the games. But before we play those games, you want to see an up-close look at this rifle. First thing I want to show you is that it has an adjustable sight on it. The rifle is pump action. The pump action presses the reset button and the trigger fires the bullet. There's a little slot on here for an expansion that we'll talk about a little later. The stock of the rifle has some nice wood grain finish, and you can see underneath it here, it notes that it's been made in Japan. Let's talk a little bit more about that detail. The Japanese company that manufactured the rifle casing was none other than Nintendo. Nintendo at this time had not yet entered the video game market. Originally established as a playing card company in 1889, by 1971 the company had branched out as a toy manufacturer. One of those lines of toys were electronic light ray guns called the Kosenju series. As a matter of fact, the original Duck Hunt was a Kosenju game released in 1976. I have a review of that system on this channel. Moving back to Odyssey, I could not help but notice that the Odyssey rifle bears a striking resemblance to the Nintendo Kasenju SP rifle released in Japan in 1971. I reached out to David Winter of PongStory.com, who is the world's foremost Odyssey historian. He confirmed my suspicion, stating that Ralph Baer personally told him that Nintendo manufactured the gun. At a 2002 forum, Masayuki Umera, the designer of the Nintendo Famicom, publicly stated that Nintendo provided the gun casings to Magnavox but not any of the electronic components. Looking inside of the rifle reveals a battery compartment not used by Odyssey, but which was used by Nintendo's toy, as can be seen in this photo, courtesy of Odyssey. The Odyssey gun also has the slot for the SP scope, which Magnavox did not use in their product. In 2016, video game historian Leonard Herman wrote in Phoenix 4, The History of the Video Game Industry, that Nintendo also imported the Odyssey to Japan. However, David Winter contends that this was localized by a company called Nanyang and not Nintendo. We've finally moved on to the light gun gameplay segment. This is Prehistoric Safari, which utilizes game card number 9, as do Dogfight and Shootout. In these games, player 2 just moves the light around the screen while player 1 attempts to shoot at it. Shooting Gallery here utilizes game card number 10. The difference between 9 and 10 is with game card 9, one player moves the player character and then you shoot at it, and if you hit it, it disappears. In this game, when you use game card number 10, you're actually shooting at the ball. So I have it set up right now so the ball is actually bouncing back and forth between the paddles. So every time I shoot at it and hit it, it disappears. And when I cock the rifle, the ball comes back into play. There are several homebrew games made for the Magnavox Odyssey. The first came out in 2009, which is Oddball. It comes in its own little case. And more recently, Oddball LE, the limited edition, came out, which also includes the free homebrew Red versus Blue. We're going to be taking a closer look at both of these games now. This is the original 2009 release of Oddball. This made it the very first homebrew on the Magnavox Odyssey. When I released this, my goal was to just be able to make a new game, for a console I love. When I came out with a limited edition many years later, I decided that I can use a Genesis case. Using a Genesis case was a lot easier than hand making a custom box, which was, painstaking and super difficult. The Genesis case holds everything in the package much more easily than the cardboard box. Opening up the package, here's what we have. We have a screen overlay. Now the original version actually had 2 screen overlays, and you can see the other screen overlay on the box art. Oddball LE has 2 overlays for a game called Red vs. Blue, which was a free homebrew that I released many years ago. And of course, the game comes with instructions. One set of instructions for Red versus Blue, and another set of instructions for Oddball itself. Oddball uses game card number 11, which had never been previously released. So one of the things I wanted to do was put an unreleased game card on the market. Oddball uses a sand timer. It has a custom score sheet should you choose to use it. And then of course here is the printed game card number 11. This was originally to be used with basketball, but was abandoned in favor of reusing game card 8, which we previously saw for Handball. Here's Peacekeeper Command-O. Instead of using a Genesis case, I realized that I could use a DVD case, which made the process a whole lot easier. Comes with instructions and static clings. This was released for free. There's a video of the release announced on this channel, and then only a few physical copies were sold, just 5. Here we have Oddball in action. The goal of the attacker is to walk the ball up the screen using the wall on the left. You walk the ball up and down the screen by adjusting the English knob on your controller. The attacker's goal is to get the ball over top the sky castle and then hit the reset button to plunge the ball into the castle. A hit against the castle is only legal if it comes from above the castle. Game card 11 and game card number 8, which is what basketball ended up using, it's also what we saw the handball uses, are almost identical. The only difference is when you press the reset button, it plunges the ball down. So when I designed this game, I designed the whole game around the mechanic of pressing reset to plunge down the ball. This is the last game that we'll take a look at in this video. This is Red versus Blue, the free homebrew. This is very similar to Handball, and it's a very simple concept. So you use the English to direct the ball. Your goal is to get it into your opponent's square. If you miss getting it into your opponent's square, you lose your turn. If your opponent gets it into your square and you don't hit it, you lose a point. Thank you so much for joining me on this Odyssey, exploring the world's first video game console and some of its games. In the future on this channel, we're going to have more Odyssey game reviews because these are very poorly documented and there's not a lot of reviews or videos out there, and some don't even have any. I personally love the Magnavox Odyssey, released in '72. As you know, it's the first home video game system. It's almost really not even a first-gen console because it's so primitive. It has no CPU, and a lot of its games are more board game than they are video game. They're more like those 90s VHS games, you know what I'm talking about, where, yeah, there is a video element, but it's a board game at heart. Invasion, for example, that I showed you, is one of those. Football is one of those. Baseball is one of those. Wipeout is one of those. So we'll have videos of those coming up in the future on this channel. But undoubtedly, table tennis for Odyssey is a video game in the lineage of Pong. And as we all know, Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, saw table tennis at an Odyssey exposition and then went on to invent Pong. I think anyone who loves gaming and gaming history should experience the awe and mystery of the Magnavox Odyssey. It's such a unique experience. And even though it's a little expensive, Odyssey's not that expensive. You can probably get away with one at auction for $250 or less. It's much cheaper than a modern game system, for example. And just to avoid the seller, Magnavox Odyssey specialist, the guy hoards Odysseys and buys them on auctions and massively marks them up. Look for an auction from really just about anyone else. They're easy to work on when they're broken. It's usually that one of those pots that I showed you in the video isn't aligned right. So you can take it apart and mess with it and see if you can get it going. Sometimes there's been battery leakage in the system and you can clean that out and replace the battery holder and stuff like that. It is just a beautiful, well-engineered piece of machinery. If you want to learn more about the Odyssey, I can't say enough good about Video Games in the Beginning by Ralph Baer, who is the inventor of the Magnavox Odyssey and several prototypes that predate the Magnavox Odyssey. For example, did you know that part of the Odyssey story is that it was originally supposed to be providing games as part of a cable TV service in the 60s, where they would broadcast colorful backgrounds and you'd play games on top of that. You didn't. Well, you really got to read this book because there's so much information in this book that isn't commonly known. Unfortunately, we lost Ralph Baer in 2014, which still seems really recent to me, even though it's been 4 years later. But his website's still up. His book's still up. Link is in the description. That's all for this episode of Retro Game Living Room. I'll see you next time.